everybody, thanks for clicking on this video. I am glad you joined me here in the Stone Cottage kitchen yet again. Today we're going to be making a semi-sweet cocoa chocolate chip loaf. I messed around with this recipe for a long time and I think finally got it just right. Not too sweet, it's not too sour, it's got a little bit of everything. It can be so versatile and I'm excited to share it with you guys today. I'm going to flip the camera around and show you the step-by-step of the whole process. And then if you're interested in the actual printout recipe with all the measurements and everything, comment below and I will send you the direct link to the free recipe card. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let's get going. And welcome back. Today we are going to make a yummy, yummy loaf. We are actually going to be using bread flour, and that is going to give the extra lift to this sourdough loaf. So we are making the semi-sweet cocoa chocolate chip loaf today. We are going to be using, as always, a good active bubbly starter. It needs to have doubled in size, maybe even fallen a little from the double. And that is going to be the leavening agent for our bread, of course. We need some nice room temperature water. We're going to need some salt. And we are also going to need some cocoa. Okay, you can use a dark cocoa, a medium cocoa, whatever it is, but just an unsweetened cocoa powder. And then we are going to be using some brown sugar as just a light sweetener. This is not a super sweet bread. And lots of I like the mini chocolate chips. I think they work better for this instance. But whatever you like, this is kind of where we're starting. So let's get started. First things first, we are going to get our starter in the bowl. So always measure that out first. Like I said, I typically am going to be using a kitchen scale with this. You can get them super inexpensive and they just make sourdough a lot more accurate. We're going to add in our water. I always like to mix the starter and the water together first. You can use a fork, you can use a spoon. I have a Danish dough whisk right here. You don't have to have that, but mix it all together, kind of get it into just like a milky substance, basically. And that allows everything else to kind of incorporate into that bubbly starter a little bit easier. So once we have the bubbly starter mixed with the water, we're going to add in the cocoa powder. This, I think, it doesn't ever feel like it really fully incorporates, so beware of this when you're making this loaf. But it really, I think it's better than adding it to the flour. I think it gets more incorporated into the mixture overall. So I try to mix and mix, although it kind of almost seems like it's floating on top of the mixture. Mix it into the water and starter really well. It kind of has a funny texture looking, but this is, I think, the best way. I've tried a lot of different steps and a lot of different methods, and I think this is the best way to do it. So you keep on mixing, and then after this, we are going to add in the sweetener, our brown sugar. Okay, so again, I've said this loaf is not super, super sweet. So if you were looking for a really sweet bread, like loaf type style, I'm not saying you shouldn't try this. I definitely would love you to try it because you might love it, but this is not the super sweet chocolate bread. I didn't actually want that. So this is why I came up with this recipe, because all the sourdough chocolate chip loaves I found out there were just a little too sweet for me. Like, I like a good sweet bread, like a pumpkin bread and a banana bread, but I wanted this to be almost something that you could use savory also, and I'll talk about that later, but a little bit of salt also in the mix. So always got to have a little salt, even with the sweet, to balance it all out and make the flavors pop. So far we've added starter, water, cocoa powder, brown sugar, and salt. And then after this, we are going to measure out and weigh in our bread flour. So like I said, the bread flour is, I don't want to say it's 100% necessary. If you only have all-purpose flour, it should still work appropriate, but the bread flour definitely just gives it this different texture. Sometimes when you add in new elements to sourdough, it can kind of mess with the fluffiness of the bread, the rise of the bread, and as we all know, sourdough can be a little finicky. So the bread flour for this kind of specialty loaf just works better with the cocoa add-in, and it helps give it just like a really incredible fluffy texture. Sometimes when you add in things to sourdough, it can
Basically, like weigh down the bread, I guess is the best way to say it. So adding in or using bread flour in place of all purpose, or even maybe half and half if you really want to try it, give it a little experiment. It just allows it to give it a little more lift. So you incorporate the bread flour together. I bumped my camera a little bit. As you could tell, it got a little shaky there. Um, it is going to feel like a little bit more of a dry mixture. So sometimes when you're not doing regular sourdough, it doesn't feel quite as wet and sticky. That is normal. As you see here, I'm going to go in with my hands and knead it a little bit more rather than using the dough whisk at this point. So this is normal. If you start mixing and it's a little more dry, that is okay. As it begins to rise a little and you let it settle, it's going to get a little bit softer. But this actually is a really fun and lovely dough to work with. It's not near as sticky as a regular sourdough. And I think part of that is the bread flour. And as you see here, sometimes if I feel like it's just a little too white floury looking, I will sprinkle a little extra cocoa powder on it just to make sure as it's rising and baking, it's going to have that really lovely dark chocolate coloring to it. So you kind of gotta, as I always say in a lot of my videos, work with the situation as you're going. Don't be too fussy about every little thing sticking to every rule, right? You kind of got to feel it out as you go, and you'll get so much more comfortable doing that as you keep baking. I sprinkled in some chocolate chips. Now, typically, you'll see in the recipe, if you comment below, I'll share the link to the free recipe for you. But I typically put in a certain amount of chocolate chips. You could put in less, you could put in more. Sometimes I just sprinkle with my heart and go with it and see how it incorporates. But basically, the chocolate chips are the last step. So, this is what it looks like after you're done with the initial mix. It's going to be a cute, tiny little ball, and you'll be amazed at how much it rises. So, I typically really don't do very many stretch and folds with this. It just doesn't really need it. You know me, I'm the queen of let's not excessively overwork our sourdough. If you want to put the effort in and do a couple stretch and folds, great. But I've noticed with my sourdough, it really, personally, the method I've come up with and the ratios I use, it doesn't make a huge difference in the way my loaf turns out. I've done tests and I don't know if it's just dehydration or the recipes I use, but I feel like it's just a lot of extra work for nothing different in the end. So literally, I just set that bread and forget it after the initial mix. As you see, about 12 hours later, I let it rise and it's a beautiful, fluffy, uh, big ball of dough. So I just throw it out on a board with a little bit of flour and you really don't even need to knead it a lot. I mean, it really is just such an easy dough to work with. So here you see I barely even did a whole lot with it. I kind of am just trying to add a little tension to it so it gives a little more spring to it in the oven. But that sat on my counter. Okay, let's remember that for 12 hours, not in the fridge. It did not cold ferment. This will be what's next. So that was just at room temperature. And then I put it in a floured banneton, or you could put it in a floured bowl. And then I let it sit in the fridge. And it even rose a little bit more after it sat in the fridge. But it can sit in the fridge 1 hour, 3, 4 hours. The longer you let it sit, the tiny bit more sour it can get. So keep that in mind with all sourdough. The more you let it cold ferment in the fridge, the little bit more sour it will tend to get. So keep that in mind if you're not wanting that. Then you place it on your parchment paper and give it a good little score. I have done some really fun scores with this because the contrast of the dark cocoa and the white flour, if you dust it with white flour, you can really make a lot of fun different designs. So keep that in mind for this. If you're gifting it or if you're making it to present at a party, there's a lot of options there. So once you get this in the oven, typically it's always best already preheated oven, and your Dutch oven can be hot or not. It really doesn't make a huge difference. But this is it when it comes out of the oven. It is beautiful. It is just a perfect little round loaf. It doesn't spread out funny. And I always like to temp my bread, but especially this one because it is the add-ins can sometimes cause it to cook a little slower. You always want it to be about 200. And as you see here, it is a beautiful, fluffy, fluffy loaf. And there are so many yummy, amazing things that you can do with this cocoa chocolate chip loaf. Because remember, it's not very sweet. It cuts really easy. If you are worried at all about browning or getting too dark on the bottom, as a lot of people suggest, throw a pan under it in the oven, and that sometimes can help with that darkening of the sugars in the loaf. But look how fluffy it is. Now, I know a lot of people like to see a lot more holes in their dough. I don't. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I don't want stuff oozing out when I'm making a sandwich or putting butter and jam on my bread. So I like my, maybe this is controversial, but my sourdough not to have all those little holes in it everywhere. So you can slice this bread up. We love to make French toast with it. It's really yummy. You can do so many different things. I also, because it's not very sweet, it can make kind of a fun, different, yummy, like sandwich bread. If you're wanting to go out on a limb and make like a ham or turkey sandwich, even with like a little cranberry preserves at the holidays, with some leftover turkey, it can kind of give that funky little extra flavor that you might like. It just depends on your palate and what you are into, but it is really a beautiful loaf of bread. It's a showstopper, and I'm sharing it right now as we get close to the holidays because it's a really fun holiday loaf to bring to something. It's great with coffee in the morning with a little butter and jam on it. It's great with wine in the evening. It would have a lot of great possibilities. And it's been a really popular one when I make and take to different things. And when I used to sell my bread, it was very popular as well. So, also, I think all sourdough is delicious with honey butter, and especially this one. It is so yummy with honey butter. So, definitely give that a try. Like I said, you can get this recipe for free if you just comment below, and I will send you the link to the printable recipe card. And I would love to have you make it and see your feedback. And if you have any other questions on sourdough, please message me or comment below. Find me on Facebook, message me there, or go find my other videos on YouTube because I really have a step-by-step tutorial on the basic sourdough loaf that is so easy, and you can get my ebook too. Thanks.